What happens when one of Britain's most respected actors sits down for what should be a friendly chat about his latest film, only to face a barrage of personal attacks and condescending remarks from a talk show host who clearly thinks she knows better? In just 34 seconds, Colleen Nolan would make one comment so outrageous, so completely out of line that it would trigger one of the most shocking walkouts in daytime television history. Gary Oldman walked into the Loose Women's studio that morning, expecting the same routine every actor experiences during press season. A couple of smiles, a few lighthearted jokes, polite conversation about the movie, and then goodbye. After decades in the industry, he knew how these interviews usually went: comfortable, predictable, harmless. But what he didn't know was that this particular interview would become something so explosive it would dominate social media for days. The moment he sat on the famous purple sofa, he felt something was off. The air didn't feel light. The smiles didn't feel natural. Ruth Langsford offered him a polite greeting. Janet Street Porter gave him an approving nod. Kay Adams looked professional as always, but Colleen Nolan, she looked like she was waiting, not to interview him, but to corner him. "So, Gary," Colleen began with a smile so rehearsed it almost glimmered under the studio lights. "Lovely to have you here. Before we talk about your film, I have to ask about something that's been bothering me." Gary raised an eyebrow. He wasn't expecting controversy. "Oh, what's that then?" Colleen leaned forward like a detective confronting a suspect. "You've been quite critical of the film industry lately, haven't you? All this talk about how terrible Hollywood is, how actors are treated badly. But Gary, let's be honest, you've made millions from that same industry. Isn't that just a bit hypocritical?" The other panelists inhaled sharply. The studio filled with a tension that wasn't supposed to exist on daytime TV. For a moment, even the cameras seemed to hesitate. Gary kept a pleasant expression, but the smile didn't reach his eyes anymore. "I wouldn't say hypocritical, Colleen. I think it's possible to appreciate the opportunities I've had while also acknowledging the problems that exist." But Colleen wasn't satisfied. She pressed harder, her tone losing all softness. "Gary, you're sitting there in an expensive suit. Probably drove here in a car worth more than most people's houses. And you're telling ordinary people the industry needs to treat you better?" Ruth shifted uncomfortably. Janet frowned. Kay looked away. The audience sensed the storm forming. Gary inhaled slowly. He tried to keep the conversation grounded, professional, respectful. But Colleen was warming up, clearly preparing to escalate. And this was only the beginning. Gary's composure was tested immediately as Colleen leaned back slightly, a smug expression curling at the corners of her lips. "Creative integrity," she scoffed. "Gary, you were in the Batman films. You can't tell me that was about creative integrity." The studio shifted in unison. Ruth Langsford glanced desperately at the producers. Janet Street Porter opened her mouth, but quickly shut it, unsure whether to intervene. Kay Adams simply stared, eyes wide, hoping the situation wouldn't spiral further. Gary, however, remained seated, his hands gripping the arms of his chair, trying to channel calm. "I've never claimed to be above anything," he said, voice steady. "The Batman films were excellent pieces of cinema. I was proud to be part of them. But that doesn't mean I can't care about other aspects of filmmaking, the storytelling, the way actors are treated, the integrity of the craft." Colleen rolled her eyes dramatically. "Integrity? Come on, Gary. You've spent decades making big-budget blockbusters, and now you want to lecture us about art?" Gary's jaw tightened slightly. He could feel the familiar mix of frustration and disbelief rising, but he forced himself to maintain poise. "It's not about money, Colleen. It's about the responsibility we have as creators. Young actors, writers, crew members, all of them deserve respect. That's all I'm saying." "Oh, so now you're the champion of the working class?" Colleen's voice rang sharp and cutting. "You spend more on dinner than most people earn in a month." The audience gasped audibly. The tension was tangible. Ruth, Janet, and Kay all looked mortified, unsure how to salvage the moment. Gary inhaled, his expression calm but icy. "I don't need to justify my personal finances. I came here to talk about my work, my passion. I didn't come here to be attacked." Colleen, clearly relishing the confrontation, pressed further. "Attacked? I'm just asking honest questions. If you can't handle scrutiny, maybe you shouldn't be criticizing the industry you've made millions from." Gary's voice lowered. controlled but filled with quiet authority. Colleen, that's not fair. These are not attacks disguised as questions. They are assumptions, prejudices, misrepresentations of my intentions. And I won't sit silently while you demean what I've worked for. Colleen's smile faltered slightly, sensing the shift in energy. You know what your problem is, Gary? She said, her voice dripping with venom. You think your awards and accent make you better than the rest of us. But you're just another washed-up actor desperate for relevance. Lecturing from your ivory tower. The studio froze. Even the crew held their breath. Gary's eyes went. Respect, he said simply. That is all anyone deserves. And cruelty is never entertainment. The air in the studio seemed to crackle as he paused, letting the weight of his words settle over everyone. The audience, silent until now, finally shifted, sensing history in the making. Gary's hands gripped the edges of the sofa as Colleen leaned forward again, clearly unwilling to let the confrontation end. You've worked in Hollywood for decades, she said, her voice sharp. You've benefited from the system enormously. And now you want to bite the hand that fed you. Isn't that a little hypocritical? Janet Street Porter tried to interject. Colleen, I think. No, Janet. Colleen cut her off, her tone cold. I want Gary to answer this. You want all the benefits of being a star, but also want to be seen as some kind of serious artist. That's rich, isn't it? Gary's calm demeanor wavered slightly. He exhaled slowly, gathering his thoughts. Colleen, I have never claimed to be above anything. I've simply suggested that we can do better, that stories can be more meaningful, that people in this industry can be treated with more respect. The audience leaned in. Ruth Langford's expression was a mix of disbelief and worry. Kay Adams looked helpless, and Janet's face reflected the tension that had gripped the room. Colleen, however, was enjoying herself, clearly thinking she had the upper hand. Oh, respect, she said with a harsh laugh. You've worked with the biggest directors in the world. You've won awards, been nominated for Oscars. What more respect do you want? It's not about me personally, Gary replied, his voice calm but firm. It's about young actors starting out. About writers whose scripts are changed beyond recognition. About crew members working long hours for little pay. That's the respect I'm talking about. Colleen waved her hand dismissively. Oh, so now you're the champion of the downtrodden. How convenient. No proof, just words. Gary's eyes narrowed slightly. I've quietly supported numerous charities. I mentor young actors. I've used my position to create positive change where I can. I don't need publicity to prove that integrity exists in my work. And yet you dismiss all of it as irrelevant. The studio was silent. Even the crew seemed frozen, unsure how to respond. Colleen pressed on. You talk about creative integrity, yet you've made sequels, franchises, basically taken the easy money like everyone else. There's nothing wrong with sequels or franchises, Gary said, rising slightly, his voice strong but measured. Some of the best stories ever told are part of larger narratives. They can reach millions of people and still contain depth, meaning, and moral complexity. You don't get to decide what constitutes legitimate art, Colleen. The room went utterly quiet. The audience could feel the tension like electricity. Colleen, caught off guard by his firmness, faltered for just a second, but she tried to regain control. I know television, she said sharply, and I know what real entertainment is. And it's not grown men running around in cap. The cameras hovered, capturing every tense second. The studio seemed frozen, waiting for the next move. Knowing the climax of this confrontation was near, Gary's eyes locked on Colleen, his expression a mix of controlled anger and disappointment. You've spent the last 15 minutes attacking my career, my character, and my intentions, based on nothing but assumptions and prejudice, he said quietly. But every word carried across the studio like a striking bell. You've dismissed entire genres, questioned my integrity, and insulted my intelligence. And now, when I defend myself, you call it overreacting. Colleen's face reddened slightly, but she forced a smirk. Overreacting? I'm just asking honest questions. Honest. Gary's voice rose, firm, yet precise. These aren't honest questions. They're attacks disguised as curiosity. There is a difference between scrutiny and cruelty, and I refuse to tolerate this any longer. Janet Street Porter leaned forward, trying to mediate. Gary, please, let's. No. Gary interrupted, his tone calm, but unmistakably final. No, Janet. I came here to talk about my film, to share my passion. not to endure a character assassination disguised as entertainment. Colleen opened her mouth, unsure now. Come on, Gary, don't be so dramatic. Dramatic? He said, his voice rising with controlled authority. You called me washed up. You questioned my relevance. You insulted me on national television. And now you dismiss my reaction as drama? That's not fair. That's not professionalism. That's not human decency. The audience was completely silent. Ruth, Janet, and Kay looked frozen, unable to intervene. The crew held their breath. Gary stood, microphone pack in hand, his posture commanding, calm, yet unyielding. This is about respect, he continued, turning slightly toward the camera. Respect for people, for their work, for their lives. Cruelty is not entertainment. Harassment is not journalism. And assumptions are not questions. If anyone watching at home takes anything from this, let it be this. You deserve to be treated with dignity, whether on television or in everyday life. He turned back to the panelists. Ruth, Janet, Kay, I am genuinely sorry you were part of this. None of this is acceptable. None of this is normal. And I hope you can remember that professionalism matters more than headlines, more than ratings, more than someone's ego. Colleen, now visibly unsettled, opened her mouth, but no words came. Gary stepped off the edge of the sofa area, paused, looked her directly in the eye one last time, and said, That's exactly why I can walk away. Because the people watching deserve better than this. And because integrity and decency cannot be negotiated. Without another word, he strode past. Finally, Ruth found her voice. We'll be right back after this break, she said weakly. The cameras cut, but the moment lingered. In just 34 seconds, Colleen Nolan had turned a simple interview into a historic television moment. And Gary Oldman, dignified and unwavering, had walked away, leaving an unforgettable lesson about respect, professionalism, and courage.